Hey guys, tonight we step into a world long before Wi-Fi or electric light bulbs. A world where the air smells of wood smoke and sweat, and the clatter of horses' hooves is your morning alarm. You enter the year 742, a time when Europe is a patchwork of restless tribes and shifting borders, where every village holds a story of battles, fought and promises broken. The Franks, your people, live amid dense forests and muddy rivers, and power is as fragile as the bark on an ancient oak. You, yes you, they are about to become Charlemagne, the man history will call the father of Europe. Though you probably won't survive the political backstabbing and endless wars that come with the title. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start life in a muddy, cold Frankish village under the ever-watchful eyes of local lords and churchmen. Your cradle, rocked by the distant rumble of conflict. The Franks themselves are a hardy, warrior people, blending Roman legacies with tribal customs. Imagine togas traded for thick wool cloaks, dyed in deep indigo or saffron. Power is raw, personal, and often gained with a sword rather than a signature. The landscape is wild, dense forests where wolves howl, rivers swollen with spring rains, and farms barely able to feed their owners. Your family, the Carolingians, are rising in influence, but not yet kings. Your father, Pepin the Short, is a charismatic leader with ambition burning like a forge fire. His story is already legendary. He's the one who wrested power from the fading Merovingian kings with the Pope's blessing. A bold move that puts the Franks firmly on the map. You're born into this shifting world, where loyalty is currency and betrayal lurks in shadowy corners. Historians still argue whether your birth was marked by some celestial sign or just the usual midwife's grunts and cries. But one thing's clear, you enter a world primed for transformation. Your first senses are filled with the clanging of smiths' hammers, the sharp tang of oiled leather, and the smell of hearth fires, all setting the stage for a life destined to shape continents. Meanwhile, beneath the veneer of warriors and kings, there's a curious fringe. Some Frankish nobles drink fermented honey wine while reciting ancient runes, a tradition almost forgotten, but still alive in secret groves. It's a reminder that your world straddles pagan past and Christian future, a tension you'll wrestle with your entire life. And so it begins the first chapter of a journey that will see you crowned emperor. A man whose shadow stretches far beyond the forests of your youth. You grow up with the weight of legacy pressing on your small shoulders, the echo of your father's name, like a drumbeat you can't ignore. Pepin the Short, your dad, is no ordinary ruler. He's the man who snagged the crown with the Pope's nod and turned the tide against the old Merovingians. As a child in the Frankish court, your toys aren't wooden swords or painted horses. They're miniature battle plans and real weapons, fashioned small enough for your hands. And your bedtime stories aren't fairy tales, but the gritty accounts of your father's campaigns. You learn early that power smells like sweat and blood, and that every alliance could crumble with a whispered betrayal. You practice horseback riding on muddy fields, your boots crunching on frost-hardened earth. While the wind bites through, your wool cloak dyed in the rich russet of your clan's colors. The halls of your family's estate are alive with the chatter of knights and clerics, the scent of beeswax candles mixing with roasting venison. Your tutors, often monks with ink-stained fingers, teach you Latin and the Christian scriptures, but also the harsh realities of ruling lands stitched together by loyalty and fear. Historians still argue whether your education included secret pagan texts, whispered about in cloistered corners, or if it was strictly church-approved learning. Either way, you develop a sharp mind, capable of both poetry and war strategy. You get a taste of politics, young, watching how your father balances the Pope's favor with the temper of restless nobles. A delicate dance you'll have to master yourself. Your mother's influence isn't just background noise either. She weaves wisdom and strength into your upbringing, reminding you that leadership demands both sword and mercy. Oddly enough, some sources hint that you might have shared your cradle with a future rival, possibly a distant cousin who vanishes mysteriously from the records. Scholars debate this, but it adds a touch of mystery to your early years. Between lessons and drills, you sneak away to the village markets, fascinated by the merchants' colorful stalls, the cries of hawkers selling spices, and the peculiar mix of languages, Frankish, Latin, and the rough tongues of conquered peoples. This chaotic blend is your future empire's heartbeat. So, as you trudge forward, you carry not just your family's name, but the burgeoning hopes of a people poised to reshape the face of Europe. You're barely a teenager when the clang of battle drums and the smell of burning villages become a backdrop to your life. This is no boy's game anymore. Your first taste of warfare arrives under the cold light of dawn, clad in a too-heavy helmet that presses down on your young head, your hands trembling around the grip of a spear that feels heavier than the whole kingdom. You learn quickly that war is a messy, noisy business. Smoke stings your eyes. Horses neigh in panic, and the clash of steel is deafening. Your first fight isn't a glorious charge, but a brutal skirmish against Saxon raiders. And you discover that bravery is often just stubbornness mixed with fear. The lessons come fast and harsh. You're taught to ride, fight, and command, but also to read the signs of the land, where ambushes might hide beneath a thicket or which river crossings could spell doom. The scent of wet earth after rain mingles with the metallic tang of blood on the battlefield, a strange perfume of survival. You witness the chaos of retreat and the fleeting joy of victory, realizing early that history remembers the winners but not the screams of the fallen. There's a quirky tale your tutors whisper about a battle where you supposedly used a makeshift catapult, basically a giant sling made from leather straps and farm tools, turning peasants' ingenuity into a surprise weapon. Historians debate if this really happened, or if it's just a tall tale told to boost morale. But whether true or not, it captures the essence of your rise: resourceful, relentless, and occasionally improvisational. As you grow in rank, the lines between friend and foe blur, and alliances shift like sand beneath your boots. Your mentors preach Christian duty, but the sword often feels like the final judge. And yet, despite the brutal realities, you hold on to a sense of justice, one that historians still argue about. Was your war driven by faith, ambition, or a mix too tangled to unravel by the time you're a seasoned warrior? You know that the battlefield is a cruel tutor, but the only one that shapes kings. The echo of clashing swords becomes the rhythm of your life, and the weight of the crown you'll one day wear settles heavier with every campaign. Your family name, the Carolingians, starts to echo through the great halls and smoky taverns of the realm like a herald's trumpet. The Focus clan, or rather, your own growing clan. Depending on how the scribes spin, it rises with a blend of ruthless politics and battlefield prowess that makes even the highest nobles glance sideways. Suddenly, your dinners are no longer quiet affairs by flickering candlelight, but gatherings where guests tuck daggers beneath their togas. Eyes sharp, laughter clipped, like sword strikes. The air is thick with suspicion, whispered plots, and the subtle art of power played like a lute in a crowded room. You learn quickly that in this game, a smile can hide a knife, sharper than any blade you wield. Family alliances are forged and broken over goblets of wine. Promises made on saintly relics and broken before the meal's end. Your ancestors' legacy becomes a double-edged sword. It opens doors but also paints targets on your back. Your armor is no longer just steel but reputation, polished by tales of victories and whispered rumors of betrayals. There's a curious medieval custom that some noble guests would arrive with secret messages sewn into the hems of their cloaks, a kind of invisible whisper courier system that could change the fate of a kingdom overnight. Historians debate whether this was widespread espionage or just courtly paranoia dressed in fanciful stories. But either way, it's clear that survival depends as much on knowing who to trust as on how fast you swing a sword. Your role shifts from mere warrior to strategist and diplomat, balancing honor with necessity in a world where the line between friend and foe is as thin as parchment. The focus name becomes synonymous with power and peril, a constant reminder that in the dance of crowns and daggers, the music never stops. And so, as the sun sets on one battlefield, you find yourself stepping into the shadows of intrigue, where battles are fought with words as much as with weapons. Historians still argue whether this subtle war was more dangerous than the ones with swords. You are thrust onto a grander stage, the rugged lands of Anatolia sprawling before you like an unwritten scroll. Now, commander of imperial armies in this turbulent eastern frontier, you find yourself alone against 1,000 horses. Vast maps spread like ancient spells across rough wooden tables. The dusty wind stings your eyes as you trace borders drawn by blood and ambition, each line a promise of conquest or a threat of annihilation. The horse's restless neighs echo your own restless mind. Tangled in strategy and the weight of expectation, your armor feels heavier here, not just with metal, but with the burden of command. You learn quickly that geography is a merciless tutor. The rocky hills conceal ambushes, the rivers can drown entire battalions, and the sun beats down like an unforgiving judge. Yet, there's a strange beauty in the chaos, a land where empire meets wilderness, where your decisions ripple like stones tossed into a stormy sea. In quieter moments, you retreat to a simple wooden bucket filled from a nearby spring, washing away the grime and doubts in icy water. The chill, a fleeting reminder that even a general is human. You study the maps under flickering torchlight, tracing routes with a calloused finger, imagining how your forces might outmaneuver the elusive foes who know the land better than any imperial chart. There's an odd camaraderie with your horsemen, bound by shared hardship and a common cause, though some days you wonder if loyalty is just another weapon in this endless war. Medieval messengers bring news wrapped in leather pouches, their riders galloping through treacherous passes with the urgency of fate itself. Historians still argue whether your Anatolian campaigns were more about defense or aggressive expansion. But you know the truth is messy, like the blood and dust on your boots after a hard-fought day. The empire depends on you. And Anatolia demands more than just bravery. It demands cunning, endurance, and a stubborn heart. The clang of steel fades, replaced by the quiet murmur of prayers whispered beneath vaulted stone ceilings. Between relentless campaigns, you find yourself drawn to a monastery's austere embrace, swapping the battlefield for a monk's habit. It's a strange duality one moment, a war-hardened commander barking orders across dusty plains, The next, a humble supplicant, chanting ancient scripture beneath flickering candlelight. Your hands, once steady on the sword's hilt, now trace delicate calligraphy. The ink a stark contrast to the blood you've spilled. The monks around you seem both bemused and wary, their eyes flickering between your battle scars and your newfound piety. You memorize verses, quoting scripture with surprising ease, as if the holy words themselves might shield you from the chaos outside. Yet, when the Empire demands, you're quick to launch catapults, your prayers mingling with the roar of war machines. It's a curious faith, one, where devotion and destruction are strange bedfellows. You learn to find peace in the rhythmic tolling of bells, the scent of incense curling through the chill air, the quiet moments before dawn, when the world holds its breath. The monks' simple wooden bowls and woven wicker baskets feel worlds away from the clutter of armor and weapons. Yet the discipline of both lives is strangely similar: order amid chaos, ritual amid uncertainty. A quirky tale circulates among the cloisters that you once smuggled a small dagger hidden inside a holy book, a reminder that old habits die hard. Historians still argue whether your monastic vows were sincere spiritual devotion or clever political maneuvering. But either way, the monastery offers a refuge, a place to gather strength before the next storm. As you sit in silent contemplation, the weight of empire still presses upon your shoulders, a constant reminder that even monks must sometimes take up arms. You find yourself marching again, this time dragging the empire's banner across the rugged hills of Cilicia, a land scarred by ruin and rebellion. The terrain is unforgiving rocky slopes that bite at your boots, ancient fortresses, crumbling like forgotten memories, and the ever-present threat of dysentery lurking in the camp's stagnant water. The sun beats down mercilessly, dust swirling in the air, clinging to sweat-soaked armor and stained tunics. Your army moves like a restless tide, crossing narrow passes and broken roads, the banner fluttering defiantly against the pale blue sky. You've become adept at reading maps, marked with scribbled notes and cryptic symbols, but nothing can fully prepare you for the brutal reality of conquest. The locals watch warily from hilltops, their eyes flickering with a mix of fear and defiance. Every skirmish is a lesson in patience and ruthlessness. Each castle siege a test of endurance and strategy. Among your soldiers, the stench of illness mingles with the metallic tang of blood and the earthy scent of crushed stone. You find humor in grim moments, joking with your generals that dysentery might be the Empire's deadliest enemy yet. Yet beneath the banter lies a grim truth. Survival is as much about stamina and sanitation as it is about swords and spears. There's talk in the camp of strange omens, a comet blazing through the night sky, an eagle circling endlessly above. Some claim these portend divine favor, others whisper curses. Historians still argue whether your campaign in Cilicia was a brilliant expansion or a costly overreach, fueled by ambition and desperation. As the sun sets behind jagged peaks, you stand on a ruined wall, the Empire's standard snapping in the breeze, knowing that every step forward comes at a price. The conquest is far from over, and the echoes of battle will soon call you once again. You step into the relentless whirlwind of reform, shaking the foundations of military tradition with your new tactics, confusing allies and enemies alike. Your mind is a forge, hammering out innovations that ripple through the ranks, new formations, stricte discipline, and equipment changes that make soldiers grumble, but also fight smarter. In the dusty training grounds, you oversee drills where soldiers wield unfamiliar weapons, or execute maneuvers that feel more like dances than battles. The clang of iron and shouted commands echo against stone walls, mixing with the sharp scent of leather and sweat. Your reforms unsettle generals raised on old ways, who mutter about wasting time and fooling with fate. Yet, you persist, convinced these changes will carve victory from chaos. You share quiet moments with trusted officers, debating whether a shield wall or a cavalry charge will best break the enemy's line. One eccentric advisor even suggests training pigeons to deliver messages, an idea met with skeptical laughter, but quietly tested in secret. Rumors swirl through the camps about your growing obsession with order. Some call you Nikephoros, the accountant, a nickname that sticks like stubborn grime. Your soldiers grumble, but victories start to pile up, proving your methods work. Mostly, you smile wryly, knowing that history tends to judge reformers harshly at first. Behind the scenes, a fringe debate unfolds. Did your reforms genuinely revolutionize Byzantine warfare? Or were they simply tweaks to an already powerful machine? Scholars still argue, poring over dusty manuscripts while you push your army forward. A commander blending tradition with innovation, ready to meet whatever challenges the battlefield throws your way. By night, beneath flickering oil lamps, you draft new orders, your hands steady despite fatigue, eyes sharp with purpose. The future of empire depends on these changes, and though the path is uncertain, you embrace the chaos, because in war, adaptability is survival. You find yourself poised on the jagged slopes of a narrow mountain pass, Andrasos, where fate and strategy collide like clashing swords. Your scouts whisper of a massive Muslim army advancing, their numbers like spilled ink across parchment, overwhelming and unstoppable if met head-on. But you see opportunity where others see doom. With a calculating gaze, you position your troops in ambush, hidden behind rocky outcrops and dense thickets, waiting for the moment to strike. The air is thick with tension, the smell of pine mingling with dust and sweat. You watch as the enemy columns snake through the pass, unaware of the deadly trap closing around them. Your heart pounds not with fear, but with cold resolve. When the signal is given a sharp, echoing horn blast, the silence shatters. Arrows blot out the sky, and your warriors surge like a tidal wave, battering the enemy from all sides. The clash is brutal, yet swift, your forces slicing through the disoriented foe with precision. The narrowness of the pass works to your advantage, funneling the enemy into chaos. You move among your men, rallying cries and sword strikes inspiring courage. The ground becomes a tapestry of blood and shattered weapons, but your men hold firm, relentless. Historians still argue whether this victory was a stroke of genius or mere luck masked as tactical brilliance. Meanwhile, your reputation as a master of ambush solidifies. Whispers of the ambush at Andrasos, traveling far beyond the empire's borders. Yet, beneath the triumph lies a harsh reality. War is never clean, and victory often leaves bitter scars. At dusk, as the sun sets behind craggy peaks, you stand amid the aftermath, victorious but weary. The cries of the wounded mingle with the quiet prayers of the survivors, the air heavy with the weight of what was won and what was lost. In these moments, you feel the burden of command, a sword-edge balance between glory and sacrifice. Dawn breaks over Aleppo, casting pale gold light onto the battered walls of a city that has just surrendered after a long, grinding siege. You stand atop the ramparts, the Empire's banner fluttering in the chilly morning breeze. While your soldiers rest with weary eyes and stained armor, the air is thick with a mix of relief, exhaustion, and the faint, smoky scent of recently quenched fires. You can almost taste the bitterness of victory, tinged with the uneasy question, was this justice or vengeance inside the city? Merchants cautiously reopen stalls, their faces etched with fear and hope. Local nobles exchange guarded glances, pondering the new order that will now dictate their lives. You remember the siege tactics you employed, starving the city slowly, tightening the noose until resistance broke, an approach some call merciless but effective. Your faith justifies the hardship, your vision convincing enough to make even the harshest critics pause. Historians still argue whether your actions in Aleppo were a righteous reclamation or ruthless conquest, a debate fueled by the contrasting accounts of chroniclers from both sides. Some praise your discipline in preventing wanton destruction, while others whisper of secret massacres and shattered alliances. You know that war rarely fits into neat categories of right and wrong. As the sun rises higher, you take a quiet moment to look beyond the battlements toward the distant hills, wondering how many more cities will face this fate. The weight of leadership presses down, heavier than any armor, but in this fragile dawn, you hold on to a sliver of hope that your relentless pursuit of order and strength will forge a lasting peace. Even if the path there is paved with sorrow, the frontier feels like a restless beast under your watchful eye, stretched thin, vulnerable, and constantly shifting. You spend endless hours poring over maps, sketching fortresses where rivers twist and mountains rise, knowing each stone wall is a thin barrier between order and chaos. The air smells of damp earth and the smoke of campfires as your engineers oversee the hurried construction of walls, towers, and watchposts along the broken borders of the empire. These aren't mere fortifications. They are the bones of your vision, the physical embodiment of your determination to hold back the tides of uncertainty. Your soldiers grumble under their breath about the constant shouting, the harsh discipline, the endless drills that wear on nerves as much as muscles. They call you the accountant behind your back, a nickname born from your obsession with logistics, supplies, and strict military reforms that leave no room for waste or weakness. You take it as a badge of honor, knowing that order will outlast chaos in the long run. The irony isn't lost on you. The man who commands armies is also the Empire's strictest bean counter. Historians still argue whether these border policies brought lasting security or simply delayed inevitable conflict. Some say your fortresses created a buffer zone, a protective shell that bought precious time. Others claim they hardened resentment among neighbors and fueled future rebellions. But standing there, listening to the clash of iron tools against stone, you feel the pulse of an empire trying to breathe steadier. At night, beneath the cold stars, you sometimes wonder if walls can truly keep out the storm. But for now, you push those thoughts aside and sharpen your focus on the next challenge. Because Imperis, like you, are forged not in comfort, but in constant struggle. The Emperor's death hits like a thunderclap, rippling through the palace halls and court chambers like a shadow over a feast. You, Nikephoros, stand poised as the storm brews offered a crown by ambitious courtiers whose smiles are as sharp as their daggers, but whose loyalty might be as thin as the gold threads in your robes. The offer is tantalizing and treacherous. The imperial diadem, a heavy circlet bearing the weight of Byzantine power, tempts you with its gleam, but the fine print is written in whispers of betrayal and blood. Your mind races through the possible futures, knowing well that a crown is as much a prison as it is a prize. You recall the lessons of battle and the whispers of monks that power must be seized and held with both iron will and cunning guile. The court is a nest of vipers, and your enemies wear the masks of friends. Still, history beckons you forward, urging you to step into a role that might make or break the empire's fragile balance. Some scholars still debate whether your acceptance was an act of duty or ambition dressed in humility. Did you take the crown to save Byzantium, or to grasp personal glory? The answer remains lost in the vaults of time, as elusive as the fleeting smile of Empress Theophano, who watches the political chessboard with calculating eyes. As the golden crown settles on your head, you feel the weight not just of metal, but of expectation, legacy, and the ever-present shadow of death lurking behind every noble word. Your reign has begun, but the true battles, political and spiritual, are only just dawning. Marrying Empress Theophano feels like stepping into a dance, where every step is a calculated move between charm, ambition, and barely concealed scheming. She is a woman of sharp intellect and endless patience. Her smile, as disarming as a dagger hidden beneath silk. Her presence at your side is both a blessing and a gamble, as she carries the legacy of the late emperor and a network of courtiers with agendas as tangled as Byzantine mosaics. You learn quickly that in this imperial court, marriage is not just about companionship, it's a battlefield of whispered deals, secret alliances, and power plays. At banquets and council meetings, Theophano's eyes gleam with quiet fire, and some say she has at least 3 contingency plans for every crisis, plans whispered to the right ears at just the right moment. Her influence grows, not through open commands, but through subtle nudges and veiled threats. Wrapped in the honeyed tones of a practiced diplomat, you wonder if the Empress's loyalty is as steadfast as your own, or if she plays a longer game, aiming not just to survive, but to shape the empire's future to her liking. Historians still argue about Theophano's true motives. Was she a schemer bent on power, or a survivor navigating a treacherous world dominated by men? You find that the truth, as always, lies somewhere in between, shaded by the complexities of love, duty, and survival. In the quiet moments, her smile softens, and you glimpse the woman behind the crown, vulnerable, cunning, and unyielding. Together, you and Theophano face the challenge of ruling an empire on the brink, balancing faith and force, tradition and reform, with the ever-present threat of betrayal lurking in gilded corridors. Taking vows of celibacy while ruling an empire feels like balancing on a razor's edge, especially when your new wife watches with a mixture of disbelief and intrigue. You've become a monk on the throne, clad in the austere habits of faith, even as you command armies and issue decrees, leaving bishops scratching their tonsured heads, and Theophano raising a skeptical eyebrow or two. It's a curious sight, a hardened warrior cloaked in spiritual rigor, quoting scripture mid-battle and fasting between war councils. The monasteries whisper about your piety-politics combo, calling you a paradox wrapped in humble robes. You, however, find a strange comfort in this duality: prayer in the morning, strategy in the evening. Your devotion isn't mere performance, it's a shield, a sword, and a symbol meant to unify a fractured realm under one holy cause. Still, you're aware that some see your vows as political theatre, a way to distance yourself from earthly distractions while tightening your grip on power. Theophano's charm now seems tempered by caution, as if she's learning that love and politics don't always share the same altar. You wonder how she balances ambition with faith, how courtiers interpret your spiritual transformation, and whether your empire will embrace or resist this new, devout ruler. Historians still debate if your celibacy vow was genuine faith or a calculated move to cement your authority in an era when divine favor was the ultimate mandate. In this strange interlude, the battlefield feels a little quieter, the prayers a little louder, and the crown a little heavier. You march forward as the monk emperor, caught between two worlds, yet determined to master them both, knowing that faith, like steel, can be forged in fire. You turn your gaze toward the heart of the empire, Byzantium itself, and decide it's time to prepare for storms yet to come. The capital, once a glittering jewel of imperial luxury and intrigue, now becomes your fortress of austerity. You militarize Byzantium, filling its narrow streets with guards clad in russet and indigo, their faces stern beneath crested helmets. The clatter of iron boots echoes off ancient stone walls as gates are reinforced and watchtowers rise, each a silent sentinel over a city bracing itself. Gone are the days of opulent silks and embroidered gold. You banish fancy clothes in favor of practical, sturdy tunics and leather boots. Nothing says fun, like a mandate against luxury. Courtiers murmur behind their hands, startled by the sudden shift from decadence to discipline. While common folk find comfort in the promise of protection, the air is thick with incense and resolve, the scent of burning tallow mingling with the faint metallic tang of weaponry. You walk the ramparts yourself, inspecting the newly built walls, your cloak billowing like a dark banner against the pale sky. This militarization isn't mere paranoia, it's necessity. News from the east brings whispers of Fatimid ambition, and you know that the empire's borders are fragile threads, waiting to snap. So you reinforce the city's defenses, layering stone upon stone, and tighten the reins on a population, both proud and restless. Theophano watches from her chambers, her smile unreadable, while bishops grumble about the austerity you impose in God's city. Historians still argue whether this brutal discipline saved Byzantium from collapse or suffocated its spirit under iron and stone. But for now, the city stands armored and alert, a fortress ready to face the uncertain dawn. You hear the distant rumble of change stirring across the desert sands. Egypt's Fatimid dynasty is rising like a sandstorm on the horizon, reshaping your maps and your strategies overnight. This new Islamic power, with its shimmering banners and ambitious commanders, unsettles your carefully drawn borders. No longer can you rely on old alliances or familiar enemies. The political landscape shifts beneath your feet like quicksilver. You pore over worn parchment maps, tracing routes across Anatolia and Syria, your finger hovering anxiously over distant cities now tinged with new threats. Your generals bring grim reports, Fatimid ships prowling Mediterranean waters, their sails stark against the sun, their crews eager for confrontation. You tighten your grip on coastal fortresses, ordering more patrols and sharpening the spear points of your navy. The smell of salt and tar from the harbor mixes with the dust of the marketplace, where merchants whisper of the new power's wealth and fervor. Meanwhile, you negotiate delicate diplomacy, weaving fragile webs of alliance and deterrence, each thread tested by the relentless winds of ambition. But while the Fatimid threat looms, you also embrace innovation, inland naval campaigns that surprise your foes, launching Byzantine ships up rivers, where none expect an armada, turning the desert into a watery battlefield. This boldness shocks Muslim ports and shifts the balance of power, forcing enemies to rethink their defenses. Your tactics are unconventional, audacious, just as your reforms often are. Historians still debate whether your naval exploits were strokes of genius or reckless gambles. But there's no denying the energy you bring to the Empire's survival. You stand as the bulwark between an ancient world and a changing future, watching the tides of empire rise and fall beyond your walls. You favor siegers over open battlefields, turning patience into a weapon sharper than any sword. Starvation and thirst become your allies as you encircle cities, their walls towering but slowly weakening under your relentless grip. You order the construction of siege engines, wooden towers topped with archers, catapults hurling stones like thunderbolts, battering rams pounding gates until splinters fly. The air is thick with smoke from fires set to siege camps, mingling with the cries of hungry defenders and the clatter of armor from your weary soldiers. City by city, fortress by fortress, you coerce submission, not just through bloodshed, but by making life unbearable for those inside. Slowly, keys and wine cellars are handed over, sometimes through parley, sometimes through exhaustion and despair. The siege becomes a theater of psychological warfare. Hopes fade, food disappears, and the defenders' spirits crumble like brittle parchment. Yet you maintain strict discipline among your own men, the mindful that hunger can turn friends into foes as easily as enemies. Your reputation for peace through siege spreads, a mix of fear and grudging respect among both your subjects and foes. This method isn't always popular with your soldiers, who long for the glory of open combat, but it's effective. You can't help but admire the strategic patience it requires waiting, watching, pressing just enough without tipping into reckless cruelty. Some historians suggest your sieges prolonged conflict unnecessarily, while others credit them with sparing countless lives by avoiding pitched battles. Behind the lines, you share quiet moments of prayer and reflection, aware that war wears down more than just stone walls. The burden of command weighs heavily, but so does the knowledge that your empire's future depends on endurance and resolve. You tighten the grip on your army through ruthless discipline and relentless reforms, earning the nickname Nikephoros, the accountant, from your soldiers who joke about your obsession with numbers and order. Every man is accounted for, every sword inspected, every ration measured. You introduce detailed registers of troop strength and strict punishments for disorderly conduct. No more drunken brawls or pilfering. Loyalty and efficiency come before all else. The clinking of coins and the rustle of parchment replace the chaotic din of battle plans shouted in haste. Your reforms also extend to pay and provisions, insisting that soldiers receive their wages on time, a novelty that improves morale and keeps desertion rates low. You mandate rigorous training schedules and organize the army into cohesive units with clear chains of command. The sight of your troops drilling under the harsh Anatolian sunshields raised, spears poised, becomes a symbol of your iron will. Even your enemies grudgingly acknowledge that your forces fight not just with courage, but with precision. Yet, your obsession with rules and numbers breeds some resentment. Veterans grumble about the loss of old freedoms, and some whisper that you're more interested in bookkeeping than battlefield glory. Scholars still debate whether your reforms stifled the fighting spirit or ultimately saved Byzantium from chaos. One thing is clear: you transformed a ragtag collection of men into a disciplined war machine, ready to face threats from every direction. Late at night, amidst flickering candlelight and piles of documents, you pore over reports and ledgers, the weight of empire balanced on ink and parchment, the accountant emperor, the warrior who counts, not just victories but every soldier, every coin, every detail that could tip the scales towards survival. You face a growing storm as wealthy aristocrats bristle at your new taxes and military levies, their grand villas and lavish banquets suddenly shadowed by your stern demands. These nobles, accustomed to living by their own rules, send angry letters dripping with thinly veiled threats, and host extravagant parties where gossip sharpens like a dagger. They grumble about losing their privileges, plotting to undermine your authority by hiring mercenaries and whispering rebellion. You watch from your throne, a monk emperor tangled in politics and war, knowing that the cost of loyalty is steep. Despite their protests, few press on, convinced that the empire's survival hinges on your firm hand. Your reforms have reshaped the military and the treasury, but the aristocrats' resistance reveals the fragile balance between power and privilege. Some say your tax hikes were necessary, a bitter medicine to fund fortresses and armies. Others argue they sowed seeds of discord that would bloom in future rebellions. Historians still debate whether your policies ultimately strengthened the empire or hastened its internal fractures. You sharpen your resolve as courtiers and noblemen circle, like wary wolves, their smiles hiding daggers sharper than any you wield on the battlefield. Meanwhile, you keep a close eye on your trusted generals and the murmurings in the palace halls, especially those linked to your ambitious wife, Empress Theophano. The Game of Thrones is as perilous as any siege, and you are both player and prize. Sometimes, you wonder if ruling an empire is harder than winning a war, as you navigate treacherous alliances, court, intrigues, and the ceaseless demands of power. But in the quiet moments, you remind yourself why you endure, because a united Byzantium must stand strong, even if it means facing enemies both outside and within. Your eyes narrow as rumors swirl that Empress Theophano's smile hides secrets darker than court politics, whispers of late-night meetings with younger, more handsome generals flicker through palace corridors like ghostly shadows. You know well the art of intrigue. Yet even you find the Empress's charm both disarming and unsettling, a puzzle wrapped in fine silk and ambition. Some say she plays a dangerous game, weaving alliances with men who could threaten your reign. Others insist it's mere gossip, palace smoke meant to distract and destabilize. While you strategize wars and manage empires, the personal battlefield at home grows complicated. You recall how the Empress's laughter once lifted the heavy air, but now, in dim candlelight, her eyes seem distant, calculating. Scholars debate whether Theophano's ambitions were driven by love, power, or survival. Historians even question if her whispered plots saved or doomed your rule. You try to keep your focus, but the tension gnaws at you like a slow-burning fire. Behind closed doors, alliances form and fracture. Trust is as fragile as fine glass. You can't afford distractions, yet you feel the delicate threads of your marriage fraying, tangled with court factions and rivalries. Empress Theophano, the woman who once stood beside you, now feels like a queen of shadows, her intentions inscrutable. You remind yourself that ruling Byzantium demands navigating not just armies but hearts and whispers. In the quiet moments before dawn, you steel yourself both for the battles to come and the subtle war at your own hearth. Because in this empire, victory isn't just on the battlefield, it's in every glance, every whispered word, every smile that masks a knife. You watch young Basil II grow under your wary eye, a crown-polishing apprentice on the grand stage of empire. Eager and observant, though his ambitions burn hotter than his polished armor, Basil absorbs every lesson you reluctantly impart. From sword drills at dawn to the cold calculus of court politics. But behind his respectful gaze, you sense a sharp mind, quietly weighing your every move. You wonder if he admires you, or merely endures your presence as a stepping stone to his own throne. Historians still argue whether Basil's later ruthlessness was born from admiration or rebellion against your shadow. You try to guide him, instilling discipline and patience. But the boy's fiery spirit resists the restraints of protocol. Sometimes, when you catch him practicing fierce battle cries in the empty halls, you see flashes of the Bulgar Slayer he's destined to become, yet you also glimpse the loneliness behind his youthful eyes. A burden, few heirs, understand the constant scrutiny, the pressure to surpass not just ancestors, but you. You recall your own restless youth, forged in the chaos of war, and sympathize more than you let on. Their lessons are not just in swordsmanship, but in survival, how to navigate a court where allies can turn enemies with a whispered secret. And power is as fragile as gilded parchment. You ponder if the empire will be stronger with Basil's iron will, or if his fire will consume what you've built. Meanwhile, you remain a watchful mentor and a wary competitor, aware that the throne may demand sacrifices neither of you fully comprehend. The boy's growing shadow stretches longer every day, and you realize that in training Basil, you are shaping the empire's future, even if it means stepping into history's quiet margins yourself. You set your sights on the eastern frontier, a rugged expanse of mountains and deserts where threats gather like storm clouds, ready to sweep across your borders. Here, you order the construction of fortress after fortress, stone walls rising like stubborn sentinels against the tide of invasions. Each stronghold is a complex puzzle of battlements, towers, and hidden passages, designed to keep the Empire's enemies at bay while inspiring confidence in weary soldiers. The work is grueling, and the men grumble beneath their breath. But you know these defenses will shape the Empire's survival for centuries to come. Some historians still debate how much credit you deserve for these fortresses, given the earlier Roman foundations they often built upon. As the cold winds bite through the high passes, you walk among the builders, wrapped in heavy wool and leather, your breath misting in the frosty air. You discuss tactics with engineers and listen to soldiers' tales of raids and skirmishes, reminding yourself that these walls are more than stone. They are symbols of hope and resilience. Yet beneath the grand designs lurks the constant fear that even the mightiest fortress can fall, and that no amount of stone can fully protect an empire if its heart wavers. You also send spies and scouts into enemy lands, eager for news and secrets. Because fortress walls alone won't win wars, you need information as sharp as any sword. Your nights are filled with maps, spread across wooden tables, candles flickering as you plot lines of defense and offense, trying to stay one step ahead of enemies who adapt just as fast as you do. Despite your efforts, famine creeps into the countryside, crops wither, and prayers rise from the fields as men and women look to the heavens for relief. Your popularity dips like a faltering lance, and the weight of leadership presses heavier with each passing day. You remind yourself that no empire stands without hardship, and that true strength often emerges from the hardest trials. You rally your forces for a grand vision, an eastern fortress system that would rival Rome itself. A network of stone guardians guarding the empire's fragile borders like a web spun tight against the chaos beyond. Each fortress is meticulously planned, with walls thick enough to stop arrows and gates, fortified to withstand battering rams, while inside, barracks, house, soldiers ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Your engineers pore over blueprints, debating the best angles for defense, while you oversee every detail, knowing that the fate of Byzantium rests on these fortifications. The construction sites buzz with activity, men hauling stones, smiths hammering iron, and masons carving intricate reliefs that tell tales of victory and divine protection. You wear your armor less these days, trading the battlefield for council chambers and dusty plans. But your mind remains sharp as ever. Historians still argue whether this fortress system was more a symbol of paranoia or pragmatism. But you believe it's both a necessary shield against a world that never ceases to threaten. Meanwhile, whispers circulate among nobles and priests alike. Some say you're obsessed, that your fortress obsession blinds you to diplomacy and softer power, but you counter that without walls. All the prayers and treaties mean little, as winter snow blankets the walls in white. You stand on a tower, watching the horizon blur into the mist, knowing well that your work here is as much about legacy as survival. Yet, as stone piles higher, so do tensions inside the empire. Your reforms, harsh and relentless, breed both loyalty and resentment, and the line between guardian and oppressor grows thin. Still, you press on, convinced that iron and stone will carve Byzantium's future. One fortress at a time, the fields begin to wither under a merciless sun, and the chatter in the streets turns from triumph to unease, as famine creeps across the land like a shadow. You feel it too, the weight of empty granaries and hollow bellies pressing down on your shoulders. Peasants wander the roads, gaunt and desperate, clutching brittle stalks of wheat as prayers rise from crumbling churches, begging for mercy from saints who seem silent. You attend masses yourself, murmuring scripture with a heart heavy but resolute, knowing that faith alone can't fill empty stomachs. The court grows restless, whispers of rebellion mixing with tales of miracles, and you find yourself caught between the hunger for bread and the hunger for power. You tighten the purse strings, even as nobles grumble and merchants grumble louder, accusing you of coldness. Historians still argue whether your handling of the famine was wise prudence or brutal indifference, but you know that leadership in times of scarcity demands hard choices, none of them pleasant. Meanwhile, the skies grow dark with the threat of storms, and rumors spread that the drought is punishment for sins long buried. You order rationing and organize relief, sending grain caravans to the worst-hit provinces, even as your own body feels the strain. At night, you sit alone by flickering candlelight, pondering the fragile balance between faith, food, and the future of an empire teetering on the edge. Despite the gloom, you catch glimpses of hope children playing in muddy streets, a monk's quiet smile, the resilience that has always defined Byzantium. You remind yourself that after famine comes feast, after despair, determination. Still, the path ahead remains steep and uncertain, like a road washed away by floodwaters, demanding every ounce of your strength and wit to navigate. The drums of war beat louder as your thoughts turn from famine to fire and steel, and you nearly crown yourself a warrior monk king, driven by visions of an epic crusade into the heart of Muslim lands. You pore over dusty maps, fingers tracing borders like a child, dreaming of distant kingdoms. plotting the routes for armies that would ride like thunder across deserts and mountains. Your dreams are grand, holy conquest, entwined with pious zeal, and the weight of destiny settles heavy on your brow. You gather your generals, for your closest allies, speaking in tones both solemn and fiery, convincing them that this crusade is not just about land, but about faith, honor, and the very survival of Byzantium. Your soldiers are inspired, banners unfurled under crimson skies. As rumors of your plans reach distant courts and stir both fear and hope, but beneath the surface, political currents twist and turn. Some whisper, you're chasing a holy fantasy. Others worry about the cost of such ambition. Historians still argue whether this crusade was a necessary defense or a reckless gamble that drained the empire's resources. But you see it as the only way forward, a test of resolve for a ruler bound by both sword and scripture. You find solace in quiet prayers before battle plans, knowing that war and worship are strange bedfellows, yet somehow intertwined in your heart. At night, when the empire sleeps, you write letters and issue decrees, calling for unity, disciplina, and devotion. Your piety deepens, bordering on obsession, and some bishops eye you warily, while your wife watches your fervor with a mixture of admiration and concern. The stage is set, the piece is in motion, and you brace yourself for the storm you're about to unleash upon the world. Your intense blend of piety and politics begins to unsettle the bishops, who murmur among themselves about your too holy to rule act, especially when you start quoting saints and scripture mid-decree, as if your throne were an altar. They frown at your lengthy sermons on virtue and discipline, delivered like royal edicts, turning political maneuvers into moral imperatives. Your devotion is impressive, yes, but some worry it crosses into fanaticism, blurring the line between spiritual leader and temporal ruler. You, however, see it as the divine right to govern with both sword and scripture. Courtiers exchange anxious glances at your growing reputation as a warrior monk, whispering that you might be better suited for the monastery than the palace. But you brush off their doubts with a saintly smile that unsettles even your most loyal supporters. Meanwhile, your empress tries to mediate, urging moderation. Yet, she can't fully grasp the fervor that drives you to speak in tongues of fire, believing that the empire's salvation lies in holiness as much as in steel. Historians still argue whether your religious zeal strengthened Byzantium's moral backbone or distracted you from practical governance. But there's no denying the palpable tension your dual roles cause in the court. You find comfort in ritual and scripture, but also wrestle with the political fallout of your holy proclamations, knowing that faith can be as divisive as any sword. Your sermons become a kind of performance, punctuated by gilded flourishes of rhetoric and sudden references to obscure saints, leaving listeners either inspired or bewildered. It's as if you're trying to sanctify the empire itself, turning every policy into a holy crusade, every law into a commandment, and every battlefield into sacred ground. The bishop's unease grows, some plotting quietly, while others preach caution. But you remain steadfast, believing that only through divine favor can you truly rule. It's a delicate balance, a dance on the edge of faith and power that could either elevate Byzantium or plunge it into chaos. General John Tzimiskes, your trusted protege and battlefield genius, starts to cast a shadow longer than you anticipated, both on the field and in your palace. His popularity soars among the troops, and whispers circulate that he's become a bit too close to Empress Theophano, whose smiles and secretive glances now seem less about courtly courtesy and more about something dangerously personal. You watch from your throne with a mix of suspicion and weariness, wondering if your carefully crafted empire might be crumbling not from foreign foes, but from the tangled webs within your own household. Tsimiskas, once a loyal apprentice, now radiates a charisma that rivals your own. His confidence borders on audacity, and the courtiers begin to murmur about potential power shifts. Theophano's subtle influence and whispered plans stir intrigue and uncertainty, the palace buzzing with veiled accusations and hushed conversations. You remind yourself that politics has always been a game of shifting loyalties. But this feels different, a dangerous dance where the stakes are personal and the players are your closest allies. Historians still debate whether your suspicions were justified or paranoia fueled by the pressure of ruling a fractious empire. But there's no question the tension altered the balance of power dramatically. Some say the tension spurred you to tighten your grip on both the throne and the military, while others argue it sowed the seeds of your eventual downfall. You're caught between trust and doubt, piety and pragmatism, warrior and monk. Despite the turmoil, you keep up appearances, maintaining your austere lifestyle and spiritual routines. Though the weight of court intrigue presses heavy, the palace corridors echo with secrets, and every glance, every whisper, feels like a potential threat. Yet, in the eye of this storm, you remain the steadfast emperor, cloaked in faith and iron will. Even as shadows grow longer around you, you wake one morning to a palace eerily quiet. The usual bustle, replaced by whispers curling through stone corridors like smoke. They say you died in your sleep, some say poisoned, others smothered, and a few whisper it was simply the exhaustion of a lifetime, finally catching up. Your final breath slips away under a veil of mystery. Your death, the subject of palace intrigue, rumor, and hushed suspicion. The man who once wielded sword and prayer now lies still, his life ending not on the battlefield, but behind palace walls. The night before, you may have been restless, caught in dreams of both past glories and looming threats. Did you sense the tightening noose around your reign? Some say your enemies, both foreign and domestic, finally found their moment, while others insist your body simply surrendered to the relentless toll of war and politics. Historians still argue whether your death was a calculated murder or the quiet release of a warrior monastic soul who had marched too far. Your passing sends ripples through the empire. Courtiers scramble for power. Generals, eye thrones, and the streets murmur with a mix of mourning and fear. The Empress, Theophano's stoic smile, masks a labyrinth of plans and alliances, while your protege, John Tsimiskas, steps carefully between loyalty and ambition. Your legacy, wrapped in steel and silence, casts a long shadow over the future of Byzantium. In the quiet aftermath, your empire pauses, caught between what was and what might come. You are gone, but the stories you shaped of faith, ferocity, and relentless reform linger in every stone, every soldier's tale, every whispered prayer in the great cathedrals. The empire mourns, unsure if it lost a saint or a strict master with a sharp sword and sharper mind. As the dust settles from your sudden departure, the empire stands awkwardly in your shadow, struggling to place the man you were a saint, a tyrant, a soldier, a monk. Your memory is a paradox. like a sword sheathed in silence, feared by some, revered by others, and misunderstood by nearly all. Your reforms reshaped the military like a master craftsman, forging a blade. Yet, your austerity bred resentment in the halls of power. Some whisper that your iron will save Byzantium from collapse, while others grumble that your grip was too tight, squeezing life and joy from the court. The legacy you left is etched in stone fortresses, reformed laws, and the steady drum of war horses. Yet, behind these tangible marks lies the more elusive imprint of your character, one of relentless discipline, balanced by a surprising devotion to faith. A warrior who fasted between battles, quoting scripture as easily as battle tactics. Scholars still argue whether your strict piety was genuine or a shrewd political tool to command respect from bishops and soldiers alike. Your empire mourns with awkwardness, caught between gratitude for your military genius and discomfort over your uncompromising rule. Statues rise and fall, chronicle, sing your praises, and yet your name carries a hint of unease, as if the empire itself wonders if it loved you or feared you more. Basil II, your young protege, watches closely, learning from both your triumphs and your failures, preparing to wield the empire's future with hands steadier and heart perhaps less burdened. You are remembered as a blade that cut through chaos and a monk who marched too far, a figure of iron and faith, whose story is woven into the very fabric of Byzantine history. The empire you forged still stands, but it carries the weight of your silence, a legacy of steel, faith, and whispered uncertainty. Now, as night falls over the sprawling city of Constantinople, imagine yourself stepping back from the noise of war and court intrigue, into the quiet chambers where memory lingers like a fading incense smoke. Your journey through power, faith, a battle, and betrayal draws to a gentle close, but the echoes remain soft footsteps of history walking beside you. The blade that once carved destinies now rests, its edge dulled by time, but never forgotten. Your story is less about glory and more about the human threads woven into an empire's tapestry, the sacrifices, the doubts, the moments of unexpected tenderness beneath a warrior's stern exterior. You've seen the vastness of an empire stretched across continents, felt the heavy weight of a crown, and heard the distant prayers rising from villages caught in famine and hope alike. Historians will still debate your motives, your triumphs, and your failures, because no life of such complexity fits neatly into a single narrative. Instead, what remains is a portrait painted, in contrasts, a man both feared and revered, a monk and a soldier, a ruler who balanced iron and faith with a cautious hand. So now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the soft hum of the night settles in, let the story fade gently, like the last flicker of candlelight before sleep. Rest in the knowledge that even legends need peace, and every empire, no matter how mighty, finds its quiet moments. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the past lull you into calm. Sweet dreams await, carried on the whispers of ancient walls and the steady heartbeat of history itself.